Welcome to the How to Human podcast, where we explore the art, science, and soul of the human experience. And today we have a trigger word.
Triggered.
Hey, I'm Josh.
Well, I'm Sean.
You almost triggered me with that delayed response. Like, are we actually going to start now?
What is it like to almost trigger? That sounds like you're really on an edge there, you know?
Super edgy.
It's so edgy.
That's edging.
Oh, that's edgy.
So today we really wanted to talk about what triggers and playing with our triggers and edges are. And this topic has really been part of the foundations of some previous episodes that we have started, and it's going to continue through where we're going. So kind of wanted to spend some time really playing with our triggers and our edges and kind of wondering what those are. So to me, a trigger is usually something that shows up maybe around a wound or an old bruise that we've been carrying through, whether it's an internal or external experience that we've had. Maybe it comes on really fast and we could be overwhelmed and sitting in this space where it could even be incapacitating. And an edge could be a limit or a boundary.
Yeah, I read this book that was about sort of like how life inflicts these thorns into us. And then we carry around these thorns, and they're kind of like these sensitive wounds that we forget about. They just become part of us. We're not fully always aware of them. And then when somebody comes up and they poke that tender spot, we get really upset. We're like, don't do that. What are you doing? You know, we have this reaction. And it's not like they knew that there was this thing there. We've covered it up. We've put all these layers of comfort around it. And they don't know that there's a thorn underneath all these layers of comfort, all under all these like bandages and then clothing and then like all this stuff we've put there to make it seem like we don't have a thorn and there's not a wound underneath our clothing, right? And so people come up, they might try to give us a hug and we're like, go away, you know, and it's a very triggering moment of reaction. And for me, a trigger is kind of like it's when that thing that is unseen, that part of us that we aren't always fully aware of gets touched in a way that feels really sensitive and really alarming, and like you said, puts us in like a fight, flight, freeze, fawn state. And it's very reactive rather than responsive, because our body is being put into an emotional state, neurochemically, chemically throughout our body, hormonally, in a way that's like we are being put in a moment in the past where it had to protect us. And so for me, a trigger is that moment of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, where from one moment to the next, we are suddenly at the whim of these protective parts that are really trying to guard us and keep us safe.
Just sitting in this moment with it, and I listening to you, I had an inventory of like, I flashbacks of being in those moments where I've been overwhelmed, and then thinking about where that was versus compared to like edges, and thinking about how that kind of is a little bit different, and where like the spaces of growth exist between both in each of those cases. Kind of seeing where, like for me, when I'm looking at edges, I look at those places of where could that be uncomfortable? Is this a place I could grow? Um, and that could show up in so many different ways and so many different paths or challenges that could come up, interpersonal relationships, even in our own projects, work related things to uh, your own skill sets that you want to grow.
Just kind of to differentiate, to dive a little deeper into this. It sounds like triggers are kind of like they're the event, they're the moment where we're having this reaction, we're put into a state. And edges are kind of like the boundaries that we've created for what we allow, who we are allowed to be, sort of these definitions of what we allow from other people, or the situations that we allow to exist, and these edges are kind of being bumped into in some way or another, and then that's a triggering event. So it's not like to say that all triggers are showing us. Wait, are all triggers showing us edges, do you think?
Mm. I would lean to sort of the space that like maybe all triggers have, can show us edges, but not all edges are triggers in this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something in that sort of space. Uh, Maybe like a good example that just came to mind would be like public speaking, like getting in front of a group and speaking, or like karaoke. Oh, I could never get in front of a group of people and talk about something or sing. And that would be an edge in that space to me, how I could see it. Maybe it could be a trigger if you got really booed and got hit with tomatoes. I don't know. But
I mean, it could even be something as simple as I could not wear that hat. That's not a hat I could wear. Like, I couldn't do that. Yeah, good for that person that they can wear that hat, but I could not wear that hat. And that's just an edge. It's like a definition of the container that we allow ourselves to exist in. And it's not to say, and sometimes like it's the walls we've built up around ourselves to say like, this is where I am safe. This is where I am comfortable. This is my comfort zone. This is where I permit myself to exist and how I permit myself to exist. It's not to say that that's all bad. Like, there are some of those walls that really have been built to protect us in ways that continue to, and they really serve us. And then there are some of those walls that are just as much cages as they are protection, that they are limiting our sense of experience and our ability our ability to access more of the human experience. And some of those walls are old. Some of those walls have been there for a long time, and they were built for something that isn't really present as much today as we might like feel it or see it because the wall is there. Uh, and so sometimes I think of edges as like is they can be really good and constructive and helpful. They can help us build boundaries that are useful to us. And sometimes I think of them as like these limitations that really uh, kind of they don't permit us to be as expansive in terms of our access to the human experience and the full range of what's available there.
what started coming alive for me too is kind of in this space of authenticity, where if we're yearning to really be or be expressive in our own authenticity, where those edges would be those limitations on where we might yearn to be the person that wears that kind of hat, or to step into like something new, like a new skill or a new hobby, or to learn something new where it's brand new. And instead of maybe that fear of like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, how am I even going to do this? I don't even know where to start. And stepping into that edge to begin that journey of that.
I'm going to ask you a question, but then I'll tell a story to
Yes.
answer the question I'm going to ask you to give you some time to kind of think of an answer. Okay. Um, the question is there a time, could be recent, could be a long time ago, where you felt that sort of experience coming alive for you? And if do you need a minute? And do you want me to tell a story while you think about it?
Well, start with the story since you called it.
Okay. My whole life I've wanted to do martial arts and have just was told no as a kid over and over again. And then as an adult, it felt silly. It felt like it wasn't something grown-ups are supposed to do. You're not supposed to start a martial art as a grown-up. And then I started seeing like MMA fighters who were just getting into martial arts for the first time, and they were adults, right? And I was like, well, they're doing that, but I don't look like them and I'm not like them. So it's probably not for me. And just really had all these stories built up and limitations, these boundaries, these edges of containers built up around what I was allowed to be and what I was allowed to do. And those had been built in childhood, but they didn't really fit. They didn't really apply to life today. And then a year ago, I lost my dad. And I started to see where, as we sorted through his house, I started to see where the edges of his container had existed and ways that those edges had really limited him, and that he didn't have maybe full access to all the pieces of life that he had told me he wanted, but didn't really know how to go about them. It started making me take inventory of my own life. Where are those edges for me? Where are those things for me? How am I denying myself a sense of experience that I could have access to if I just evaluated this edge and decided to see if I could press against it? And one of those edges was martial arts. And so I decided to go start Kung Fu. I just started doing it with a local teacher, Sifu, or Shifu, I think is what the traditional way to say it is. And it like totally changed my life. It was transformative and it was really uncomfortable at first. And I put it off before this. I thought about it before this for a whole year and put it off until after my dad passed. And I was like, no, we're just going to go now. We're going to go now. Okay. I see these edges. I see these like edges of the container. I'm just going to push past it and I'm just going to do it. And I'm so glad I did. It was hard and I didn't like having to put myself out there at first. But I found some practices that really helped me. On my first day, came up with a practice that helped me to just lean into it. And I can share that in a moment. But I'm going to let you share your story first, Josh.
I think the biggest thing for me in sort of this edge, one of the biggest things for me that I've really had to address in way has been this being seen and perceived edge and having a fear to be in front of people, whether it's social media online or just in public events or even related to speaking in front of people or leading groups. And that was so scary and terrifying to me. And I had often had challenges in perceiving myself as a kind of a leader or, having stories attached to that, those feelings and that edge that was kind of keeping that boundary. And as I started doing like some practices and I call them labs. So like authentic relating gave me a lab to start practicing leading groups and activities. And that was a container for me to sort of practice that in a safe space. So that was one way that kind of really started pushing me through that. And then finding other spaces to lead, leading workshops, kind of moving past that fear or being very uncomfortable standing in front of a room with a microphone and starting out sort of wooden and then relaxing into it because people are here to see me. And then that was the reality of it. People were here to see me. People were here to listen to me. People were showing up to my games. And that kind of gave me that space to really flex and relax that edge and really kind of expand that out. And really kind of gave me that comfort zone to be able to show up and feel way more comfortable within myself in those spaces that I wanted to grow.
It's interesting because it sounds like you've pointed to some good potential skills in terms of how to lean into your edges. So, um, and not to say, like, and I did too, I think, identifying those edges first. How do we become aware of them? How do we notice them? And a trigger is a great moment to notice an edge, but you don't have to just wait for a trigger to notice it. You can take inventory. You can kind of like ask yourself, where are the edges in life where I feel like there's some part of me that wants to do a thing, but I just don't really give myself permission to do that. Um, and so first, noticing. Second, kind of coming up with a plan for like how can I, and maybe noticing requires a little bit more processing for some people. I mean, you might have to journal, you might have to do all kinds of different processes to really connect with yourself. I like to do automatic writing, where I just let my hand go and I don't think about what I'm writing down. I just allow it to write, and whatever comes out is what comes out. No judgment. Don't worry about spelling or punctuation. I just let it go. It flies. So that's maybe a way to sort of process or dive into noticing if you're not really good at taking inventory yet internally. Kind of identifying like what's going on inside of me. What are all of these parts and pieces of me that are here? And just asking a question and letting your hand go. So maybe a question like, What's something that I haven't given myself permission to do that I would be interested in doing, and letting yourself just go. And then once you've noticed through a trigger or through practice, and maybe processed if you need to do that, taking a moment to step into a space that feels safe. So like when I started Kung Fu, I started just one-on-one. I did not want to be seen around other people moving my body like this. Like I wasn't even used to moving my body in front of other people in a way that was comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable in my body. Especially after getting diagnosed with a chronic illness, I just really didn't feel comfortable in my body. And so doing this in a place where I felt really safe with somebody who I felt I had that we had the ability to connect and maybe build a sense of rapport was important. And so I chose a place where I felt that, where I felt like I felt safe. And I didn't even feel comfortable doing that in front of that person the first time, right? But like now I can go out in a park and do it. I can lead other people through it, even if I don't do a good job and I'm getting things wrong, because I'm just like, oh yeah, I mean, that's part of it, right?
Right. Right.
Um, so finding your safe space. Notice, process if you need to process. Find your safe space to kind of lean in and try something. And then I would say we both had supports. So Josh, in your games, you had a whole system of games, a whole system of people who were there to help train you, guide you into this process of how to lead games. I had a teacher, right? And so having supports in place is also important. When I work with organizations, we talk about like expectations, support, and accountability, creating this triangle of effectiveness. And I think the same is true for a lot of other things like this, where if you come up with like, okay, here's what I'm going to try to do, here's how I'm going to be supported in this, and here's how I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to try to do this within 2 weeks, might be an expectation. I'm going to be supported by going to a class, and I'm going to hold myself accountable in good ways and in like not in punishing ways always, right? Like sometimes it's just like I did the thing, like I need to celebrate that I stepped into an uncomfortable space and maybe like pushing on an edge, and taking a moment to reward yourself for that and to be like, I'm proud of myself, telling yourself maybe some things that you didn't get to hear uh, with those edges in the past.
And that and make it fun. That's the other thing. It's not a punishing situation, so make it a non-punishing situation. It's not pass or fail. It's, did I do the thing? Did it, and did I do better than last time? It doesn't have to be all or none. That was something that I had to learn and how to develop in my own self. I had sort of struggled with a binary pass fail for a very long time in kind of learning things or doing things. And that edge kept me in a box, and I had to kind of learn how to develop and relax into that. So really have fun with it. Kind of when we talked about the playful curiosity and um, when we were, so when you're looking to move through these spaces, really sort of have fun with it. And if you were like, oh, I did 20% better today, well, then you did amazing. You did 20% better. There's no fail in this. And that's something I really want to reiterate to people out there is um, there's no fail in a lot of the things that are going to do this. So um, I would like to share with you that there's not fear in those things. It's only the story for me a lot of times that builds that fear up in my own experience.
One thing that you also mentioned a few times, and is part of the mantra that I guided myself with on my first day of Kung Fu, I said I would share that, is to relax. And so, like, when we're doing something new, and especially something where there might be some triggering stuff, there might be a fear response. I think if we notice what's going on in our body, connect with our body, we do a body scan, start from the head, the top of the head, and move down slowly, noticing our breath, and then with every breath, noticing what's going on in a different part of our body, going from top to bottom. If we practice that and feel what's going on in our body, and then like slowly work to do progressive muscle relaxation, something where like you can kind of like notice each area. You can, if you need to, tighten it first and then release it to relax it with each breath, and just noticing areas of tightness, tightening them up intentionally with an in breath and with an out breath, really letting them go. We can actually relax ourselves internally, mentally, and emotionally by working sometimes with our body, and relaxing into the situation as best as we can, doing whatever we need to do to be able to relax into the situation, can sometimes help push into an edge.
Kind of previously too, as we gave some examples on playing with the noticing game, reference back to that episode, and that'll help give you some guidance too if you were looking to really wanting to check in with yourself and kind of get yourself back into your body. Those exercises can be really great and give you a sense to start being playful and connecting with what's around you. So, Sean, you had mentioned where now you can just go to a park and do the thing and not feel any sort of feeling or judgment about this now. So now that you've kind of stretched this edge and you've relaxed into the space, what's it like now when you go to a park and you want to go do some like kung fu exercises for a few minutes?
Well, I mean, in the rare case that I feel any resistance rising up, that's like, uh-oh, people might see me, people might watch. I just I remind myself of a few things. First of all, I didn't share the mantra, I forgot. And I was actually looking for, I couldn't find it, but it was something along the lines of, uh, I'm, you know, I am playful, I'm curious, I'm in this moment. Um, this moment only comes this one time. This moment has never happened before. This moment will never happen again. I choose to relax into this moment. I choose to be one with my breath. I choose to exist in my body. I choose to receive with acceptance. And so like relaxing, right? It's like I choose to live with acceptance. And so when I go someplace, when I was maybe first starting out, and I would go to a park and do this thing in front of other people, I might feel those like little stories pop up like, oh, people are going to see me and they're going to think I'm dumb and I'm not going to do it right. Or like, even if I do, they're going to be like, what a weirdo. Um, and I would say, I would remind myself of the skills that work for me. We'll talk later about sort of in another episode about how projection works. But essentially in judgment, but essentially, I recognized my fear of other people's judgment is probably a way that other people have judged me in the past. It's a story I carry around, might be a way I judge other people. And so when I judge somebody else, I'm like, if I were them, I'd be thinking this. And
Mm,
that's really a reflection of me, right? And so like I had to address those things. Why would I think that? And can I let go of that? Like how do I work through that? And just confronting it helped a lot. So I would realize, first of all, that's one element of it. And second of all, if somebody is judging me, they're projecting onto me, right? Like they're looking at me and they're saying, if I was that guy, I'd feel this way, or if I was that guy,
uh-huh.
I'd do this differently. And they don't maybe aren't aware that that's what they're doing. That's what they're
Right.
doing. So when I can recognize that that's the process that's happening, I can kind of let go of caring about it because like why should I care about somebody else's stories they're carrying around or the containers of definition and the edges that they've been taught to hold? I don't have to hold their edges for them, right? And when I'm noticing myself projecting onto them, I'm seeing my own edges too. And so I can see like, this is where I was taught, you have to stay in these lines. You have to stay in this container of definition. If you don't, it's maybe not safe. Uh, and I can ask myself, is that really true in this moment? And most of the time it's not. Like, is it unsafe for me to go do Kung Fu in the park? Unless there's a rival Kung Fu gang, probably not. you know, those are pretty rare. I don't think I've ever encountered one. So part of how I overcame it was A, relaxing into the moment, B, recognizing, where is this coming from? Getting really curious. We talked a lot about curiosity in the last episode, getting really curious internally about what's going on. Where is this coming from? Like following the thread backwards, and then identifying the edge of my container of definition. Like, where am I allowed to exist? Where am I not allowed to exist? How am I allowed to exist? How am I not allowed to exist? How did that get built? Is that really serving me right now? Do I really need that to keep me safe? And checking the facts on that, not like just checking my feelings on that, but checking the
Right.
facts on that.
Hearing that, also, like, one of the things that was coming alive for me in that share was in the in playing music. There's a music teacher had given me, when you hit a wrong note, hit it like you mean it, because the majority of people will never know you hit the wrong note.
Right.
And when you're out there practicing in the world and you're playing and you're doing these things, nobody's going to know that you hit the wrong note. And if you don't like try to hit it and pull back and make it, and if you just hit it like you mean it, majority of people are never going to know. They're never going to know, Sean. Never going to know.
And it's different when you're a performer on a stage to a degree, but for the most part, nobody's ever really watching you as much as you think they are. Like, we're not the center of attention nearly as much. Like, we go around thinking like,
I'm not the main character.
Oh, what are people thinking about me? And like, most people aren't even paying attention to you. And if they do, it's fleeting. It's for a moment. Again, it's a lot of projections. And then once the moment's passed, they're like, oh, cornflakes, like in the grocery store or whatever. You're like, they're thinking about whatever the next thing is that they see. They're not going to be like, can you believe that guy though? The way that, or that person though, the way that they were being themselves, even if they're having that moment, again, how long is that going to last for them? And why do you care? That's not your moment. That's not something you have to care about. So like that, I started thinking about those things. Like, why do I care so much about what all these other people think? Why am I looking to them to identify and create all these edges of my container of what I'm allowed to be?
And reflecting, I know we're on edges a lot right now.
We are.
We haven't gotten into triggers yet.
We're going to shift to those in a second.
Yeah. Actually, I lost my train of thought. So why don't we just shift into triggers? So I got triggered in my own thought process about not speaking about triggers. No.
Triggered.
Triggered. So with triggers, I know in my own experience, they can be really big. They can have like really big feelings. I know when I've been in my triggered spaces, um, sometimes I'm just operating out of the wound. That's how my language is in this, where whatever the protector piece or what shows up in that space, in some ways it can be almost automatic that I might react in a certain way or move in a certain way in that situation. And really got me thinking about it as we were discussing plans for the show and leading into curiosity. Kind of one of the questions that really came up to me is like, when I'm feeling triggered in this space or in this event, this is afterwards, because in the moment it might be too big to be curious about it. But in those moments that I'm able to kind of get back into myself, that space of like, what was the feeling and where was that coming from, to kind of give context of where that is. But man, in those moments, Sean, it can just feel so overwhelming.
What do you do when it's so overwhelming, Josh?
Besides mildly freaking out sometimes.
I mean, sure, yeah.
What I've learned to do in these moments now is to sometimes do nothing. And I don't mean this in the way if there's a harm, if I'm going to be harmed or I'm in danger. But if there is sometimes some reaction to something, sometimes it is taking an extra second to just kind of breathe and then start checking in with myself. Like, am I okay? Am I safe? Really trying to ease into that. And the more that we practice it, the responses to that can become much easier and they might be able to come quicker. So I'd like to just share some compassion out there. It's not a judgment on how fast, how soon you can do this. It is an exercise in kind of that radical acceptance place of yourself and kind of being easy and compassionate. So don't, no need to stress. It's all just practice. Um,
Listening to that, you said several things. So you said, first of all, are we safe in the moment, or and do we need to lean into the trigger and the reaction or not? So I'd say the first thing to kind of understand is triggers they have served us in the past, in many cases, and sometimes they're serving us in the moment. And so the first question to ask is like, do I need to lean into this trigger? If a baseball is flying at your head, though, don't take the time to think about it. Just get triggered and do the thing, right? Like follow the survival mechanism, let it take place, get out of the way of the baseball. Same for a car, whatever, right? Um, if you're in an unsafe situation, if you're in an unsafe place, you might have to ask yourself, do I need to change my environment? Do I need to, uh, you know, fight right now? Is it best to just stay still and hidden? Like, what is it that I need to do to be able to survive the moment? Surviving the moment is important. Like, it's not to say that triggers don't serve us, that they're not good. They often do serve us. So the first thing is to kind of identify, like, is this a trigger where it's a moment that I need to lean into the trigger? I need to lean into the stress response. And if you do that, right? But there are other times, or I'd say, and there are other times where triggers are really about, like you said, Josh, old wounds showing up. It is our body going into a distress state, where it is actually physiologically similar to a previous moment where we had another experience, and that experience is what's coming up for us right now. It's not necessarily exactly what's going on in the moment, but it's another
right.
experience. Sometimes that experience that's coming up is, again, relevant, and other times it is not. It doesn't really match the facts of the moment that we're in. And so when it doesn't match the facts of the moment that we're in, or it's not serving us to go fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and we want to get out of that extreme state, there are some pretty good distress tolerance tips that can work. Some of these are part of dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. And one of those skills is called the TIP skill. It's TIPP, just the tip. And
Just a tip.
the first part of that is T, which is tip the temperature of your face with cold water. You can do your whole head, but that's a little more dangerous. And you want to make sure you're in a safe space when you do this. Like, brace yourself. If you're standing up, the temperature should not be. It should be greater than 50 degrees. So it shouldn't be lower than 50 degrees. And you want to hold in there for 30 seconds if you can. And what this does is it basically signals to your body. It doesn't work for everybody, but for the people it works for, it signals to your body that, we're getting cold. We need to focus on temperature regulation. When we're in like fight, flight, freeze, fawn state, all of our blood is being rushed out to our limbs to be like, we got to go. But when we're having this temperature response, the blood is pulled back in. And basically our body is saying we have to focus on keeping us alive. And so it can help pull us out of that high cortisol, which is a stress hormone, that high cortisol state of stress response. So tip of the temperature of your face with cold water works for a lot of people. It may not work for you, but you can try that out. The I is intense exercise. So if you have the ability to go hit the gym or go for a run or whatever it is that you can do, if you're like, I am in a tiny apartment, I don't have any space, no equipment, and running is unsafe, go look up on YouTube, or some, I mean, I shouldn't have said that one, but some sort of app
On your favorite streaming service.
Yes, on your favorite streaming service. High intensity interval training or something along those lines. And I promise you, your heart rate will get up. It expends your body's energy with intense exercise and puts you again back into like that relaxed state because you're wearing yourself out. The first P is paced breathing. And so breathe deeply into your belly. If we want to practice it now, I can walk you through it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. If you're in a safe place to close your eyes, you're welcome to close your eyes. If you're not, If you're driving, please don't close your eyes. please stay safe. But all right, if you can close your eyes, you can close them now. And we're going to start by breathing in through our nose and deep into our belly. We're going to expand our lungs all the way, and then we're going to breathe out through our mouth. So breathe. There you go. Josh is breathing out. Now we're going to breathe in again through our nose and breathe out through our mouth. This time we're going to breathe in and out more slowly. And finally, we're going to breathe out more slowly than we breathe in. Essentially, you would continue that until you're at about 5 to 6 breaths per minute. And that paced breathing helps, again, to calm us down, helps to decrease the amount of cortisol that's being released, which is that stress hormone saying, like, let's go. Oh, things are bad. And sometimes we can pair that with the last piece. Oh, look, Josh is getting out of his fight, flight, freeze, fawn. He's like, nap time.
Nap time.
Time for nighties. So the last P is paired muscle relaxation. And so, like, while breathing in, I mentioned this before, you deeply tense your muscles, not enough to cramp, but tensing them up and noticing the tension in our body, noticing it like tightness, right? And then as we exhale, we say the word relax in our mind. It's a little mind hack trick. And we let go of the tension and loosen up the place that we were tensing up. I like to do this as progressive muscle relaxation, starting kind of like from wherever I'm feeling the most tension and then doing that, and then doing kind of a body scan with it. But you could do it however it works for you. And then afterwards, it's important because we talk about noticing, how important it is to notice. Notice the difference in your body. How do you feel after? So tip the temperature of your face, intense exercise, paced breathing, and paired muscle relaxation. And you can combine those. You don't have to just do one. You can do two of them. Sometimes you can, again, pair them together. These are not things to do on a regular basis. These are only for moments of distress. But if you did want to practice these so that you can just see what they feel like when you're not in a moment of distress, do it in a place that's really safe. Do it in a place where you can really experience deep relaxation. And then you're going to develop this association in your brain that's also a nice little mind hack that's like, okay, when I do this, I'm calm.
Sharing these things when you were kind of talking about with the breathing and kind of pausing. Some other things I found beneficial is, can I name it? And then sort of that inquiry when we talk about curiosity. Can I name the sensations or the feelings that are alive? Can I name, can I put a name to it? Can I put words around it? Is it speaking to me? Am I able to speak to it? Whatever that sensation or that feeling or that emotion is, that could lead you in a path of some awareness about what is coming up in those moments, or could even help give you some guidance on um, how to move with it and or move through it. Sometimes if you're not able to go through the wound in that way, sometimes you might just need to learn how to move with it at first, to where it becomes easier to sort of move with. So like as we get relaxed and we're not in that heightened state, or if I'm gaining that awareness that I see it's kind of happening, when I mentioned about, oh, sometimes I've learned to not do anything. And, obviously if I'm in a safe space, but sometimes not reacting and kind of taking that moment to breathe and be like, oh, I don't have to do something right now. I can maybe change the situation and reflect on it later, and maybe take those learnings or those teachings that that trigger was kind of showing me, or where that edge could have been of like, oh, this was my capacity for this situation. Is there something I need that can kind of help prepare me, or um, allow me to not uh, maybe become overwhelmed in those situations, and sort of gain that discernment about what one needs in that space.
So you mentioned several things there that are really great tips. The first is naming, and there's some evidence to show that. So first of all, like a trigger is typically going to be an emotional experience. Emotions live in our body. That's part of the reason why we're pointing to so many body things for distress tolerance, to get out of the heightened sense of reaction. Um, and in that emotion, if we need to dial that emotion down, there are some good tips for that. And one of those is to name the emotion. There's some research that shows that just naming an emotion helps to reduce the intensity of the impact of that emotion in the moment. And so just saying, and really getting as specific as we can. If you look up wheel of emotions, you'll get to see a ton of different things you can kind of select from and get as specific as you want. It might be complex. There might be more than one emotion showing up. And so naming it is a great first step. A great next step, like Josh was saying, is talk to it. Say, I see you sadness, or I see you memory of, and you can give it a name if you want. I think Josh can speak to that a little bit too. But I've had a moment, where I name the thing that is showing up for me, like pain, and I might give that a name, like I don't have one right now off the top of my head, but you could give it whatever you want. Uh, and then I call it out. And you could just call what it is. I could just say, pain, I see you. I feel you here, and give it some space to exist. And then ask it, what are you trying to show me? What are you trying to tell me right now? And then listen. And if you can't hear what it needs to say in the quiet of your mind, you can do automatic writing or another practice that works for you to kind of get that answer. So naming it, speaking to it, and then Josh, you mentioned moving through it. And I think a mistake a lot of people make when they're being triggered is they try to move past it. And they're like, you know what? No, whatever. I'm not going to deal with it. Whatever. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And when you try to move past it, what I've noticed for myself and what I've noticed for many other people is that it's kind of like burying that thing that bothers you under the ground. And then the next time you get triggered, that comes out along with everything else that's ever happened before, and this explosion like a volcano. And then you bury all that back down again along with whatever the next experience is. And then it explodes bigger, and the explosions get bigger and bigger and bigger and more harmful, sometimes more destructive. Sometimes they just become more overwhelming, and that destruction can be external. It can be internal. It could be about how you're interacting with other people and building relationships. It could be about how you're feeling inside and talking to yourself. And so moving past it can be a very temporary solution to get out of a situation if you need to. But generally, I prefer to move through it. If I can do it in the moment, it's more raw and it's easier to access. But if I have to get out of a situation, I'll do that first, and then I'll try to do my best at it later to move through it.
Speaking to the part about moving past it, um, sort of this area of bypassing. And then if we, myself, I've done this, human things, right? But can build this armor or these protection mechanisms around us. And it could be like, I have all these things to protect me from the thing that's going to trigger me. But now you've ordered, or I've ordered, I'll use I statements, or now I've ordered my life to move or operate in a certain way to completely avoid the thing that's going to trigger me. And all the things that I've built around this wound is way more work in the long run than learning how to move through it. So that bypassing it, kind of like moving past it and being like, well, I've worked through my triggers. I'm just never going to have this in my life, and I'm never going to do it. Some cases, absolutely true. But in other cases, you could be putting yourself in a box, like we talked about in the opener of the show, of sort of like uh, basically painting yourself in a corner and kind of missing um, what could be or what treasures or gifts that you could get um, by kind of locking yourself into this space. So I just wanted to really spend a moment there on the bypassing piece.
And for me, that idea of being limited, like there's this wound I talked earlier about, like the thorn getting lodged in me from a wounding experience, and then not really carving it out and dealing with it, but instead building up all this padding and sort of like hiding it, right? And trying to
Mhm,
keep it
mhm.
as protected and hidden as possible. And then there's all these things I can't do, right? If the wound's on my foot, well, I can't walk. There's like all these things that I have to build my life around the wound rather than dealing with it. And so then the wound, my life gets sort of controlled and built around a wound. And I could deal with it and maybe have more access to the ability to do more things. Um, for me, leaning into triggers and leaning into the edges that they show, or leaning into edges even without triggers, is all about expansion. It's all about my ability to be able to access more of the human experience and to be able to do more, to be more. And to me, that is freedom. Like the more that I remove those barriers, those walls that I've built up, as much as the more that I remove that padding and carve out the wounds and really deal with them and move through those moments and not past them, not bypassing, but really doing the work, the freer I become. And the more free that I become, the more joy I also have access to. Life just becomes this like sandbox again, like it often is for us when we're kids, just like we're naturally curious. And then I have a lot more room and space for things like curiosity and playfulness and getting to step back and decide how my role is going to look today. Like, what character am I going to embody? And I don't really go that deep into it, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that I can operate with a deeper sense of awareness and intentionality, and it's not these wounds that are guiding me and controlling me and navigating my experience, but instead it is like a more core me. It's not all these parts showing up saying, I'm
Right.
here to protect Sean in this kind of way. Instead, it's like this core me who gets to come out and play. And that to me is freedom. Was there a moment where or were there several moments where like that unlocked for you, where you were like, okay, here's a turning point. I'm seeing all these edges. I'm seeing all these triggers. I'm seeing all these like wounds that are controlling my life, and I want to
Yeah.
begin to do the work on them.
Yeah. Talk about relationships. Other humans can be really great mirrors for us. So, at times, Sean, you've been a great mirror for me, to kind of reflect. But a really key turning moment for me in triggering, like dealing with these triggers. Several years ago, I was dating a person, and uh, our wounds were like matched. So, from what I mean by that is, like this other person's wound and my wound were like the perfect template for each other. And in our at the time that we were dating, we were triggering each other's triggers. So it was this perpetual uh, sort of triggering each other, kind of moving through the space where each of us were not doing anything wrong. We were just trying to navigate each other and our own triggers at the same time. With that, as I was able to kind of pull back and gain that awareness of what was happening, I was now starting to see my own patterns in those spaces and where my wounds were enabling destructive tendencies in previous relationships. So now I started to see like these patterns that were showing up in me. I was like, oh my goodness, I need help. I chose to start going to therapy. And then in that space, I started to gain some deeper understanding about some things. Like I had some people pleasing and some codependency and some other areas that showed up. these were driving my relationships. I wasn't driving, they were driving. And moving through those things and really looking at them and addressing them and kind of accepting them really sort of created that doorway for me to be able to move through. There's sometimes a saying like, um, yeah, like the wound is the medicine, the poison is the medicine. It's that way. The way to heal that wound is to go through the wound. You really have to move through it in order for that to heal. In those spaces of really taking inventory and seeing those parts of myself, it was then having to give compassion because it wasn't like I was terrible. I wasn't terrible for being codependent. I wasn't terrible for being like a people pleaser or a rescuer in those ways. Those were parts that showed up because of things. And then accepting that and like in myself gave me greater space and capacity to be with people because now I'm not trying to control it for my own safety. That's kind of an example where some really powerful, really deep triggers. I cried a lot and cried a lot for like my own things that I had to heal, cried a lot for the impact that I also carried through to other people. And it wasn't specifically because it was a fault. That was just the result of what those things were because they weren't addressed.
It's so cool that you mentioned that you basically had this relationship. It's like two people crossing their own minefields to try to meet in the middle, right? Like there's these two minefields, they're right up next to each other, and then the two people are on the opposite sides of those minefields. And they have to cross their own minefield and the other person's to try in different ways. Like it's actually kind of patchy. And like they're setting off each other's minds, but also they're really setting off their own minds, right? And so that they can try to meet in the middle. And I think that a lot of triggering happens, and I think a lot of identifying and leaning into our edges happens in connection to other people. And sometimes they are acting as mirrors for us. And sometimes like they're like I think that those interactions prompt something. If you're sitting in your house, in your basement, cozied up, covered in blankets, playing video games, living this very safe, isolated life, yeah, life may not be terribly triggering because you have now like removed so many levels of elements from what could be possible there. Um, and if you have to do that, like, and I've been in that place where I had to do that, then again, how much of life am I not getting access to? Like, how much of life am I not getting to play with? And the answer for me was a lot. My big moment was actually in loneliness. And that loneliness, I think for me, being around people was hard because I had to maintain this mask of I am happy and I am good and whatever I felt the expectations were. Um, but I wasn't alone. And so there was like this discomfort with being around other people, but also it was in many ways like a nice break from just being with myself.
Mhm,
And it was in loneliness when I was in like the worst of my chronic illness
mhm,
experience and the pain was just overwhelming that I found myself at a real low place. Trigger warning. And this low place, I was kind of like every surgery I'd go into, and this is a for real trigger warning for some people. Every surgery I would go into, I would be like, I kind of don't want to come out of it. I really want the anesthesia to just take me. And I wasn't
mhm,
going to harm myself or anybody else
mhm,
because I didn't want to leave my wife and kid at the time behind in a situation where they would feel like I had done that to them.
mhm,
But I didn't really want to live either. And it was hard. It was just really hard. It's what I think a lot of people call the dark night of the soul. And so like the triggers and the wounds were just they were laid bare. Like when I got down to that deep dark valley, and we'll talk about that again in another episode someday. Uh they were just everywhere. Like I was like pulling the mines out of the ground and just looking at them, you know?
right. Mhm,
And that turning point for me was kind of like go live or die. Like go figure out how to live or, like what more is there? And I chose to live. I was like, okay, well, the anesthesia is not taking me, so I'm going to choose to live, and I chose to live. And every day from that point forward, I relentlessly pursued a moment of true freedom and of true joy. And I finally got to feel one of those moments where I really felt access to just pure true joy and pure true freedom in like a little meditation. And once I tasted that, I was like, I'm never letting go. I'm never letting go of that. I'm like, it's not like I'm trying to chase a high, but I will absolutely try to see how can I experience more of that freedom in more moments? How can I experience more access to that joy in more moments? And so then I started doing the work. I started finding those wounds where I had packed all this stuff around them. I started figuring out what's all this baggage that I had been carrying that I needed to let down. And it was hard to let some of it down because doing that sometimes feels like, am I ever going to get to see it again? And I kind of became attached, right? And like to set it down is not to leave it behind. It's just to set it down, to not carry the weight, right? And so doing all of that work, really leaning into triggers, really leaning into wounds, finding all of these different edges of where I felt limitation and pushing against those as much as I could. Again, following a lot of the strategies we pointed at. Noticing it first, right? Kind of doing a little bit of processing if I needed to. Choosing to relax into it and doing what I needed to be able to do that, finding a safe place where I could practice it at first, and then slowly increasing my the level to which I'm pushing against that edge until I can just embrace it. And that wall is kind of like broken down, and I don't need it anymore.
Kind of breaking the wall, breaking down those walls, taking those down. One of the things that really came to me in this space was when, for me, a lot of times nature is a teacher for me. So a lot
Yeah.
of things really show up for me and kind of reflect that. So, and as we were kind of navigating this and we were talking about edges and things. So if we thought of like a circle, right? It's a circle. Edges are very limited. And if we look at like a river or a stream or a coastline or a canyon, there's all these edges in that line. And to me, the edges give more, like nature would reflect, edges give more capacity for life to exist. And that's kind of how I choose to sort of push in this way. Um, I want to know more in life. So, kind of reflecting that with you, Sean, like that yearning or that desire for a richer life, to be more free and to sort of gain that agency of self and being able to be empowered to be oneself in the world, to be able to move in the world without a story that we're telling or that culture is kind of telling us, so we can kind of transcend past that. So kind of coming in a little bit of a circle again. So now going into a park or going out to this place to kind of become free to be Sean in the world. Um, what's that like now to just be able to um, really not care about being perceived by someone else's judgment?
First, let me say I still have edges. All right. I mean, you know what I mean? No matter how much I push
Yeah.
the edges of the circle's still the circle, you know? And so even when the circle is expanding or I'm finding new territories to expand into, whatever, I'm still a human being. I still have edges. I'm still figuring it out. I think even yeah. And I'd say that the difference really isn't so I don't run into edges anymore. It's more like, how do I deal with them? And it's that practice. Once, like you said, the poison what seems like poison, the pain, the awfulness of the trigger can really become the medicine. And so when you can do that transmutation of like this awful thing I've avoided for so long can become this beautiful thing that really helps break down the barriers of my ability to expand past them. Um, then triggers are often for me now prompts for expansion. A good example of that would be this. I put off going back to school for a while. So I thought, okay, I might want to go back to school. I might want to go back to school to like become a therapist one day. And can I really do that? Like, can I even get in? And if I did, could I really do it with all these limitations I have now that are physical and the way that stress impacts me very directly and impacts my body
Mhm.
through inflammation, all this other stuff, right? Can I do that? And then I had a very triggering experience, which I won't share today. Um, but it basically propelled me into the path. I felt like here is a story that I cannot look past anymore. Here is the triggering thing was something that really just made me evaluate. Um, can I really hold off on this any longer? And I felt like the answer was no. Like I felt compelled to make change. I felt compelled to be part of the change I wanted to see in the world. And so I said, no, I am going to set myself aside. I'm going to notice these fears and let them rise up. And I'm going to tell them, I hear you, I see you, and you don't get to be in control today. You can sit at the table, but you don't get to sit at the head. And I applied for school and I got in and I just finished my first semester all the way done yesterday. And like today feels like a little celebration because I did that much, right? But like the only reason that I did that is because I leaned into a trigger. And now for me, triggers, they still aren't easy, but they are becoming a path to greater freedom and more expansion.
This is a place where, um, as we work through these things, for me, I've definitely been learning to use more of the triggers as a mirror into myself. Kind of when we were talking about alchemizing them, like coming through the wound. So, also, what can I learn about myself through these ways? Like, how do I react? What part about me needs to soften in these ways as well? Because that softening, sort of that surrender, you're surrendering to yourself. If use I statements, I had to learn how to start surrendering to myself in that way. Um, and it's continual growth. It's kind of like an onion. You know, we'll continue to work through these things, and they'll still show up. Sometimes you just might see it. It might be like, oh, I see you, but now there's no action coming out of that. And then Sean, for you, how is it in your experience, like kind of having this like reflected back to you, or how is it where it's more of a mirror and not a weapon, so to speak, in that kind of way?
More of a mirror and not a weapon. Can you explain that? Can you go deeper on that?
Yeah, or like as harm on you, or as maybe like in a response, like maybe we're triggered in this response and maybe we say something we don't mean to
Mm.
someone we care about, or
Previously mentioned volcano exploding
yes.
and sort of the all of the stuff of the past erupting out to wreak havoc on the moment. Yeah. Um, well, first I want to give a plug for the internal arts. So like Kung Fu, Xingyi, Qigong, and Tai Chi have really helped me to embrace this concept of flow and softening. Of, you know, there's this concept called cotton body. Whatever's pushing up against you, you allow it to push, and then you just kind of like bounce back a little bit. You don't like spring back or push back, and you don't anticipate. You just allow it to happen, and you're just kind of like in the flow of the moment. Uh, and so the way that that's taken shape for me to be more of a mirror and less of a weapon is that I've started to lean in. I've started to figure out how to do my distress tolerance when I need to in the moment. I can remove myself from a situation if I have to, so I can do the work of getting curious. And once I've done the distress tolerance, if I need to, and I start getting curious and really dive in deeply to figure out what's going on, I can allow the experience of what's happening to flow through me. And I'd say a big piece of that for me is really identifying places where I'm putting up resistance. So there's this equation that really helped me through a lot of my own experience. Suffering, so pain is not suffering. Pain plus resistance is suffering. Pain is a sensation that arises and falls away. Same for fear. It is a feeling that arises and falls away. But when we resist the experience of what is happening, this is where the tension is created that leads to suffering. It is no longer a burst of experience that is rising and falling away. It is now something when we resist, we also kind of attach. We are attaching to that experience. We're saying, no, 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 I can't have that. I can't have that. And as we do that, we unknowingly like pack that in as a new thorn, as a new wound. And we carry it around with us and we're like, oh, I have to pad around this one. And so learning not to resist, or finding those places where I am resisting and learning to practice acceptance as an antidote to resistance has helped me a lot. And we'll talk in another episode about radical acceptance as a technique. But to give you some cliff notes, some highlights, essentially, like, I try to identify what is there in the situation that is difficult to accept, that is out of my control. And really even within my control, because I can't change something until I can accept it as it is.
Mhm.
So what is it there that I'm resisting that I need to accept? And then I imagine what it would look like if I accepted that thing. Now, that doesn't mean I have to like it. That doesn't mean that I have to let it continue to exist in the way that it's existing in my experience. But because sometimes when I accept a thing, that leads me to change myself or the thing. Uh, but I have to accept it first. And so, where am I at? Where am I putting up resistance? How do I practice acceptance? And that for me is the softening. That for me is like the going with the flow of what's going on in the moment and being there internally in a mindful way. How about you, Josh?
For for me, it's plants, right? So so when you were talking about cotton body, it kind of made me think about like plants in the wind, right? And as the wind pushes, the plants kind of just move with the wind. There might be some resistance, but it's able to kind of move with that. Um, and that for me is kind of one of those places. And then I think another important thing that I was really taking as well in sort of this area was um, it's not really a race. So we don't really need to rush or go too fast or try to push us into a place that could hurt us.
Yeah.
We could, I know for me, there have been times when I've been like, hey, I really want to meet this challenge and I'm going to fling myself into it. And at times there have been moments where I gave myself, I don't know if you want to call it a setback, but I gave myself like a hangover or like an intimacy hangover by pushing too hard and oversharing or overextending and overexposing myself before I had kind of cultivated that safety and stability within myself. Um, so that's one thing was like I could not rush my own healing or the work. Um, so that was one way that I really had to kind of lean into that acceptance piece of like, hey, it's going to kind of take time with that. Um, and the other acceptance pieces too was also sometimes like accepting where maybe I needed to show up for myself better as well. Kind of when we talked about accountability pieces, like where can I hold myself accountable for the things I can control as well? And those things I can't control, I'm not able to carry those burdens, even if there are things I don't like or it's impacting a situation. Kind of accepting it also gave me the empowerment to decide how to um, act or move through or decide what action I'm going to choose to do. So that's one part of where like acceptance has really kind of shown up for me in those ways. Like even a simple way, I struggle with skin condition, and at times it can be really annoying. And because it's on my face, it can be really annoying. And the more that I've just sort of accepted it, the less of an impact it has. Like there are days I don't think about it as much, if at all, because I'm just in the world and I've just accepted it. The more I would stress out about it, the more it would become inflamed and actually become a bigger problem. Like, right? Like, how does that work? Um, so those are ways that kind of acceptance has given me empowerment to sort of make decisions for myself, um, and also to be honest with myself about what really is. And I think that's something that's been an important lesson for me, was that sort of real self honesty, and that was also a path to self love, was self honesty.
You pointing to a lot of good things right there. I mean, even just the metaphor of the plants shows how we still want to maintain balance, right? And this is also true in Kung Fu. That although you want to stay flexible, you also want to maintain a sense of being rooted. That you don't want to just like be so with the flow that you have no real sense of consistency and groundedness. You also mentioned like being overly vulnerable in spaces where maybe that wasn't acceptable or wasn't safe, or oversharing. And I think some of the skills that we almost need a warning label on them for this is like when we're starting to begin doing this work of diving into our wounds, of really understanding the sources of some of our stuff. There can be sometimes a tendency to rely on whoever's there as support, and making sure that we have good supports in place, like therapy, like whatever it is that works for you. The safe places to do that work and share those things is important, not just because it's potentially unsafe to share things with other people openly all the time, but also, is that really the association we want everyone to have with us? Is that we trauma dump on them all of the time to the point that they're like, well, why would I want to hang out with that person? It's not fun, right? Like you were saying, have fun with it, right? And it's difficult for people to have fun with us when we can't, when we kind of trauma dump on them all the time. And so it's not to say like don't share with other people who are safe. Don't share. It's not to say that, because vulnerability also kind of breeds some beautiful authenticity in relationships that can grow them in wonderful ways. It's just to say maintain some balance and create those spaces of support that really allow you to do the work without demanding that the rest of the world show up for you. Because the whole point of this, really, for me, is less of life happening to us and more of us happening to life. And the more that we put the world in charge of how we feel and in charge of making us better, rather than taking that on and doing that in safe, supported spaces, um, the more we can see that kind of eat away at pieces of life that we really want to build up. And so you talked a lot about different like types of balance we can maintain there. Balance in how we're sharing, and when and with who, and how we can use that to build relationships, but also how we can use that in safer spaces of support to kind of like make sure we're not just putting it out there all the time. Uh, in balance and staying flexible but rooted. I think that that's really important to kind of consider approaching these things from those perspectives.
Yeah, I really agree with this. That really making sure that you have safe spaces and good support systems. Um, Community is really important, and be a good steward with your community too. Like when I'm hearing you share about like just trauma dumping all over people, I know a younger version of myself was this person,
Yeah,
and it did not
same.
cultivate like good community. I mean, I found community, and it played an important part in that moment, but I also needed a healthy community to kind of move forward. Um, and that was sometimes I've had a challenge in some of the healing spaces where it can kind of I was getting stuck in those spaces, and I really was needing also community that had some healthier outlets. Um, so ended up taking some like art classes, went to a glass blowing class and things, and trying to use like different outlets like creativity. So how can I use this in other creative ways to this energy and find that community in those spaces as well. Um,
But I also like that I forgot to mention one last thing, and that's that you mentioned the balance between another area of balance is balancing out how much we're doing this work, right? Like becoming hyper obsessed with self work is also not really living. So the whole point is to open up more life, open up more access, open up like find these parts of ourselves that are showing up to try to protect us. And again, not say like you have to go away now. It's to say like you don't get to sit at the head of the table all the time. It's to say I'm here at the head of the table and I'm going to kind of decide who's going to stand up and talk and who I'm going to listen to everybody. But that doesn't mean that you always get to be in charge. And it's about like recognizing that the best relationships that I get to have are the ones where I'm not just operating with somebody else's parts all the time and they're operating with mine, but our core selves really get to come together. That all those defense mechanisms, coping mechanisms aren't just the only things playing. We're not just playing with the minefield all the time, but we get to come together in moments as core selves who really are getting to play. And so it's about balancing, right? Not getting so deeply obsessed with the self-work that it consumes us and creates like that's our entire personality and life now. But finding still plenty of moments to come together with people to play and to get curious and to allow this experience to be playfulness and curiosity within ourselves too. That for me has helped to kind of build a healthier relationship with this type of work.
it really kind of gives me a question that's been coming up then too, is can I stay present as I go through this? Can I stay present with myself? How present am I? And that seems to be kind of like another underlying piece with this is that bringing that presence into the moment, bringing that presence to right where you are. Um, what's that like for you now, Sean, as for you to be able to be more present in the moment, for you, um, you've been a good impact and a good guide for me in the ways that you've brought, like sharing and teaching me of like sort of this presence in life. So for you, what has this been like for you to be able to be like so much more present in every day?
I mean, it's awesome.
That's why they call
I
it
don't
the
know how much
present.
deeper you want me to go in with it, but
That's why they call it the present.
Yeah,
It's the
that's
present.
because it's a gift. Yeah. I mean, it's great. It's wonderful. Like I said, that whole idea of continuous expansion, of finding more freedom and more moments and more opportunities, uh, it's really been very freeing. I don't have to overthink as much. I don't have to get lost in the doing it right as much. I can be playful with it to the point that I'm embracing failure, that I'm allowing myself to exist imperfectly and recognizing that even the idea of perfection is this contrived, constructed definition that other people came up with and it's all made up. And so allowing myself to just exist, right? Like, there was an artist that was like, just go do art. Who cares if it's a bunch of sloppy stick figures and whatever? Like, do it. It's not the point of art is not to make something good that other people can appreciate. Is to put yourself out into some form of expression, whether that is drawing or music or whatever it is, and allowing a piece of you a piece of yourself, your mind, heart, soul, whatever, that needs to speak, giving it a place to breathe, to exist in the world. And I just was like, yeah, let's do more of that. And let's be more artful with life. But we probably can't dive too much into presence. We're kind of wrapping. I mean, we're past time on our usual podcast extension.
Bonus.
So Yeah, here's your bonus material, everybody.
So should we move into any kind of integration tools or homework?
Ooh, good point. Good point. Josh, you had a number of questions and sentence starters. So I would say one piece of homework that people can do is to journal using some of these questions/sentence starters. Do you want to read those out for us?
Yeah. So let me get my radio voice. No. So take note of these, be playful with them, be curious, allow what shows up to show up. So here are our prompts we're going to go through. A part of me is afraid that if I really felt this, I might. One edge I'm noticing in myself right now is when I feel triggered, the story I often tell myself is a recent moment when I didn't feel safe to share was the emotion I try hardest to avoid is I notice I reach my edge when someone, the last one, when I'm at an edge, what helps me stay with it is.
Thank you. So those are sentence starters. And if you want to pick one of those, you can do more if you want. That would be something interesting to journal with, maybe in reflection of a triggering moment, or even trying to identify edges and kind of reflecting on where those might be. Another homework assignment that you can choose to take is to practice the tip skills. So tipping the temperature of your face with cold water, intense exercise, paced breathing, paired muscle relaxation. And you can do those in an intense moment that is distressing. But obviously, again, listen to your like, kind of notice, is this a good time to do this? Or do I need to listen to what my body is telling me? Do I need to get out of here? Do I need to fight? What is it I need to do? Do I really need to fight, flight, freeze, fawn? We've said that a few times: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fight is, again, your fight response. Like, I need to put up my dukes and I need to fight my way out of here, whether that's arguing or physically or whatever. Flight is running away. Freezing is freezing in place. And fawning is like where we praise the other person. We're like, oh, no, 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 it's okay, it's okay, right? And we try to make the other person seem okay or whatever so that we can be safe and get out. Sometimes more than one of those things happens at a time. But if those aren't serving you in the moment, and really you're just getting stuck in a triggered state and it's not serving you, try the tip skills. They can help pull you out of that moment, and then you can start practicing the other things that we talked about, getting curious, really diving in. And another homework assignment, if you choose to accept, is radical acceptance. And so radical acceptance, what we'll say is, imagine that something triggering is happening that you know triggers you, and do this in a safe place, or choose a really little trigger, something that's very easy. Like, I really hate it when that teapot goes off. Whatever it is, like, pick something that triggers you and imagine yourself turning your mind, like there's two roads in front of you. One of them is resistance. Oh, I hate that. And the other one is acceptance. I don't like it and I can accept it, right? And then imagine yourself turning towards acceptance, turning the mind towards acceptance, and imagining, if I accepted this, what would that look like? What would I do? What would I think? And try to embody that. Whatever it is, if it's an action that you would do the action. Try the action. It might be opposite to what you would usually do. And if you're not sure what the action should be for acceptance, ask yourself what you would do in resistance and then do the opposite of that.
Mm.
It's called opposite action. And so pick one of those: journal prompt, tip skill, or turning your mind towards acceptance. Thank you all for joining us and for figuring out how to human.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.